Hi, my name is TJ Davidson and I will be analyzing the poem The Fish by Elizabeth Bishop. So the title is actually right under here, but I already pre-annotated some things as you can see. But I'd like to talk about the title after reading the poem because originally the title is just The Fish. So there's not much to go off of there. I'm going to be starting with literary devices. So right away when we begin the poem, you can see some use of assonance at the start. So there's lots of use of assonance there, but I liked how it was used even better a little further on in lines 19, 20, and 21. It says, see underneath 2 or 3 green weed. Assonance is used in this poem to help set the impactful moments for Bishop, and it enhances the poem by giving it more texture, flow, and rhythm, as you can see. Next up, something that we see right away is imagery. Imagery is used throughout this entire poem in pretty much every line as it's describing this fish. So one of the first times we see it, I just picked out a couple of my favorite examples. He hung a grunting weight, battered and venerable and homely. So this imagery makes it a lot easier for us to imagine what this fish looks like. So, as I said, each line of the poem adds our own image of the fish. It primarily elaborates on just how beaten up and torn up this fish is. A couple other times we see some good imagery is on the second page, when it's talking about in lines 48, 49, and 50 about his lower lip. Grim, wet, and weapon-like. It makes it really easy to create your own image. And then we see a bit more of imagery once more in lines 56. So even though there is far more imagery in this poem, we will be moving on next to diction. So one of my favorite examples of diction is line 16 and 17. The diction used in this poem is very reflective about this experience that she had with this fish, almost formal-like. And so she goes into intense detail about the fish that she has caught, and it's cited as if she's speaking to an old friend of hers who has impacted her in a crucial way. Next we have some alliteration. So in lines 25 and 26 we have some alliteration here. Fresh and crisp with blood that can cut so badly. We have another example on our second page in line 38, tarnished tinfoil, and then some more further down, and a fine black thread still crimped from the strain and snap. So this alliteration, if you're not looking for it, it can go unnoticed. The alliteration is used several times throughout the poem, and in this example, it puts more stress on certain syllables, and this allows these syllables to carry more influence and impact. Seeing that this poem is very long, 2 pages long, 76 lines, and enjambment is used several times. So a couple examples are just here. And again, down here in lines 34 and 35. And so this enjambment, it's used several times throughout this poem especially to keep it flowing, but still being able to keep the lines short. Simile is another very, very common literary device that Bishop uses in this poem. It is in lines 61 and 62, like metals with their ribbons frayed and wavering. So that is a simile. And my favorite example is in lines 43 and 44. It was more like the tipping of an object toward the light. So Bishop chooses to use similes as she describes her encounter with the fish. These similes were used strategically. It enhances our ability to capture the entirety of this fish while she relates it to images that we can picture but don't often associate with fish. One example of the mood is seen here in lines 9, 10, 11. Here and there his brown skin hung in strips like ancient wallpaper. And another example is seen in lines 69 and 70. So the amount of detail and imagery put into this poem almost engulfs the reader, is how I like to describe it. The author relates many of the physical details of the fish to common interactions that we make every day, and this makes it easier for the readers to picture and relate to this fish. Next we'll look at tone, which is just an example can be found just above here. I stared and stared, and victory filled up the little rented boat. So that is tone. And this is an interesting example because it really contrasts the beginning of the poem. In the beginning, her victory was the fact that she caught this big, beautiful fish, and now her victory changes from being in herself capturing this fish, but to the fish itself. Despite being captured numerous times, this fish is not weak, and it continues to get away successfully, and the poet is evidently in awe of this throughout her poem. And last but not least, we have our theme. So the examples I chose for the theme kind of come throughout the poem in steps. So it starts with I caught in line 1. In line 27, I thought. In line 34, I looked. In line 45, I admired. In line 65, I stared. And in line 76, I let. Throughout the poem, as you see these add up, you see the impact that this fish has made on her. I caught, I thought, I looked, I admired, I stared, I let go. And this brings up the question, to what extent should you consider consequences when making decisions? The poet suggests to let those consequences make your decisions for you. Generally, when people go fishing, they go to capture fish to take home and eat. But after capturing the fish and getting a sense of its place in the world and what it's been through, the poet decides to let it free. Bishop did not make this decision for herself, but after thinking of what she'd be taking away from the fish, she decided that was what was best to do. So after going over all of our literary devices, our tone, our mood, and our theme, I'm going to return back to our title. This title now has a lot more meaning to us because it is the fish. It is not just any fish, but the fish that impacted this poet so greatly. And this fish can be used to represent any survivor who has gone through something harsh, something cruel, who has battle scars, but still has beauty in them from what they've been through. So a couple of my favorite things about this poem was the extent of detail and imagery used, and it made us possible for us to really picture the fish or someone or something that we associate with this fish. I also really liked the usage of I caught, I thought, I looked, I admired, I stared, I let. It really shows the steps that she went through and the thought process that she experienced. Some questions that I still had was the writer Elizabeth Bishop writing about a true fishing experience she had, or was she thinking about something or someone else and used this fish as a symbol, as many of us are? Another question I had was, what were her intentions in making the lines so short if the sentences in them were continuing on anyway? Doing this made the poem a lot longer than it would be if she hadn't used enjambment as much. And the poem ends quite suddenly when she says, "And I let the fish go." And it brings up the question, what happens to the fish after that? That is my analysis of The Fish by Elizabeth Bishop. Thanks for listening.